to the Diddy trial. Back to the Diddy trial.
Good evening, I'm Eva Pilgrim. Thanks for streaming with us. It's day 2 of testimony in the Sean Diddy Combs trial, and the prosecution's star witness, his ex-girlfriend Cassie Ventura, taking the stand. The disturbing video of Diddy and Cassie in an LA hotel hallway, one of the sparks that really ignited this case. Today, for the first time in 6 years, Cassie coming face to face with Diddy, telling the jury in graphic detail about what they say is the darker side of the rap mogul over the span of their 10-year relationship. He strongly denies all of these allegations. If convicted, Combs could face life in prison, a stark contrast to the life of luxury he's known for. He has pleaded not guilty to all charges. We'll take you inside the courtroom in just a moment for the emotional...
Bro, if he's not guilty of that, he's guilty of something. 1,000 bottles of baby oil, bro. What?
Testimony, and we'll also take a closer look at Cassie Ventura, the singer and now star witness, on the stand.
When she walked into the room, Sean Combs appeared to look at her, but she, Eva, did not seem to look at him. And during her testimony, I'm not sure she really made eye contact with Sean Combs.
Yeah, bro, yeah, actually, based on that photo, he looks like Uncle Ruckus.
Who was seated in the courtroom. She had other members of her family, her attorney there in support, but she recounted such graphic detail, too graphic for us to discuss here now, in such...
Bro, look at him. That's Uncle Ruckus. Oh, I shouldn't laugh. I'm sorry.
Soft-spoken,
I'm sorry.
matter-of-fact tones describing degrading sexual activity that she said Sean Combs forced her into, starting when she was 22 years old, and as she called herself, naive, too naive, she said, to really understand what was going on or understand the power dynamics on Sean Combs's whim, describing how he wanted to set up recording equipment to record these freak-offs. She said it made me feel insane. She said it was humiliating and disgusting.
She was only 19 when she met them. There's a nearly 2 decades age difference between the...
What? She's 30. How old is Diddy? So how old? So if she was 19, let me do the maths here. If she was 19 when this started, that would be 19 years ago. So minus 19 off of that, Diddy would have been 34, 9. That is a bit weird. That's just me. That is a bit weird. I'm not gonna lie. That is a bit weird.
These two, talk more about that power dynamic and how
That's
their
a bit
relationship
weird.
changed over time.
Well, she was 19 and a young singer, and Combs signed her to a 10-album deal with Bad Boy Records, so a long-term deal, and she said, Eva, that she only made 1 album. Otherwise, the freak-offs took up so much of her time that it stifled her music career, but it controlled her financially, she said. So she felt like her livelihood, her career, her life really depended on Sean Combs and keeping him happy. Otherwise, she said she feared what might happen.
She said that this case was about love, infidelity, jealousy, and money. And so I think something like this, Sean Combs professing to be a man of many women and Cassie potentially being jealous and maybe starting some of those fights or participating in the fights, that's something the defense is going to jump on. And then, of course, this, saying that she's super young and naive, people pleaser, getting her personality. I think her testimony really drove home the idea that this was a horrible interaction, that it was a toxic relationship. As
side note, completely unrelated. That trim is criminal. Completely unrelated. That is a diabolical trim. Cads, thank you for that word. That is a diabolical trim.
But also, I think there's something that both sides will be able to use from her testimony, that she was trafficked, as the government is arguing, but also that this could just be a domestic violence case where the defense might be able to argue not these crimes, other crimes he's guilty of, maybe not guilty of trafficking and racketeering. All right, so I think the smart thing to do, like start off, is talking about Cassie's age. She's 38 years old now. Sean Combs
She
is
stayed
55.
with him
The
for
age gap
she stayed with him for over 10 years. Why? Run.
that she was his singer and signed onto his label as a singer, and she had done some modeling in the past, and that he had the ability to control whether or not her music got out. We also saw the testimony about who was in his inner circle. We saw her talk about bodyguards and chief of staff. And to Aaron's point, she was very
Name
matter-of-fact and
names.
soft-spoken
I
when she
want to know
spoke, but when
everyone
I saw
involved.
saw
I
pictures
wasn't
of them,
involved.
it's
But
almost like
name
she started
names.
to tremble in her voice. If I'm the defense, I'm actually not that worried, because in a case like this, they've already conceded that there is allegations of domestic abuse and violence. And I'm waiting to see the government make the connection between this is simply a man and a woman, especially a man, because we're hearing the violence from Sean Combs onto Cassie, just brutally abusing her, hitting her. All the things that we said were indefensible, but we're not seeing the connection of, was this force used to compel her to go across state lines for trafficking? Or was this simply a man who was a voyager who liked to participate in these sexual escapades that we may not agree with, but in the course of that, he used violence. So I'm looking to try to slice it.
That's what I like. I don't think he's going to be found guilty in this case, you know, because it's not to do with like what the actual charges are, like not to do with him being individually like violent in a sense. But I don't think he's going to be found guilty in this case, you know. He's definitely guilty of something, but I don't think he's going to be found guilty in this.
Pick the case apart little by little.
Bernardo, how do you think the prosecution did today? What are they trying to do here?
So the prosecution is definitely laying out a picture, a story of the life of Cassie with Sean Combs, and especially the violent nature of it, but then the sexual nature of it. And I think what they're doing is piece by piece, they're laying out all these freak-off moments, and now they're starting to get to the nitty-gritty part, meaning the most extreme ones, the ones that shock the conscience. For example, when she mentioned that Sean Combs would have her participate in these freak-offs when she was on her menstrual cycle. I think that right there shocks the conscience, and the prosecution did a great job and ended.
Wait, rewind. That is fucking disgusting. That's made me feel a bit sick, you know.
With that line of questioning to show the jury that, look, this is not just domestic violence. This is not just people having consensual sex. This is the type that no one will want to engage in.
Where were these allegations used to traffic her? Where's the criminal enterprise, and not just an inner circle or an organization of Sean Combs to help facilitate him getting from point A to point B and doing the things that he likes, even though they're state crimes and not federal crimes. So I think they're going to try to sidestep.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, bro. I don't think he's going to get found guilty. I think there's definitely going to be something happen after, but I don't think he's going to get found guilty in this case, you know. Because he's definitely guilty of something. He definitely
down
is.
to what these rooms looked and smelled like after these freak-offs, the number of baby oil bottles used each time. Why do you think these details matter here?
So, Eva, the devil is in the details. When you're determining credibility, when you're determining believability, you want the witness to try to give you as much details as possible to determine whether that person is telling the truth. So that's why the prosecution is heavily focusing on these details, because in the end, this case rises and falls on the testimony of Cassie Ventura. And in order for...
I can't. I know it's unrelated. I'm sorry, but that trim is horrendous. I'm sorry. Damn.
For the jury to find her credible and believable, they have to look at her testimony as well as her demeanor, as well as anything that corroborates her testimony, and evaluate all of that to determine, in fact, whether Sean Combs is guilty of these crimes. So the devil's in the details, so they have to get it out.
Coming up, who is Cassie Ventura? A closer look at her time as an emerging star in the spotlight, to the star witness in the case.
I'm not gonna lie, I don't even know who she is. Yeah, I don't really know who she is, if I'm being completely honest. Think that's enough, Diddy, watching for today. If I'm being completely honest, I think that's enough.